From our first discovery of Mycenae to their mysterious disappearance, stay tuned to number 1 to find out what happened to the first Greeks. Number 10. The discovery of Mycenae. Technically speaking, this one has 2 different answers, because while the city of Mycenae itself was discovered in 1876, the now famous Lion Gate was discovered much earlier, in 1841, by professional archaeologist Kyriakos Pittakis. That's right, 35 years after the Lion Gate was discovered by a professional archaeologist, a businessman and amateur archaeologist by the name of Heinrich Schliemann came along and discovered the oldest known Greek civilization. He was, however, quite an accomplished archaeologist for only being considered an amateur, and upon finding the Mask of Agamemnon in a Mycenaean grave shaft, he realized that the Trojan War was a real historical event, and that the city of Mycenae must have really existed. This discovery led him to dig near to where the Lion Gate was initially found, and eventually the discovery of the ancient city and the Mycenaean people. This reshaped our understanding of the Greeks and has helped lead to many future discoveries. Number 9. The first Greeks. Greece is already best known for its mythology and its incredible stories of gods and demigods that supposedly existed thousands of years ago. And you may not realize this, but the Mycenaeans were the first ever official Greeks. It's believed that they arrived in Greece around 1650 BCE and ruled there until 1200 BCE. Although they arrived after the nearby Minoans, who also have a fascinating history. In fact, be sure to watch our video on them. The Mycenaeans were the first to arrive on the actual Greek soil and thus be labeled as the first known Greeks, touching down on the southern peninsula on the Greek mainland and making themselves at home at the Peloponnese. Aside from this, they were also the first known people to speak the Greek language and also adapted the writing style known as Linear B. This form of writing closely resembles the Minoan style, known as Linear A, but unlike Linear A, which has still never been translated, we have got a pretty good understanding of Linear B these days. Number 8. Cyclopean Stonework. Before we talk about the ancient Cyclops, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Don't forget to click that little notification bell while you're there. Anyway, Cyclopean Stonework. This may not mean much to you. Luckily, we are here to explain this terminology, and we'll start with the clear connection between Cyclopean and the word Cyclops. You know, the mythical giant humanoid with one central eye. As you may be starting to put together, the Cyclopean-style architecture refers to the sheer size of the blocks of stone that were used in the construction of their walls and entrances. So big, it was said that it would be impossible for the buildings to have been built by men, and therefore, they must have been built by something else, something mythical. This was especially the case when they were used anywhere higher than a few feet off the ground, and the people of the time had to come to the conclusion that it could only have been built by Cyclops. Number 7. The many Greek myths. While we're on the topic of Cyclops, you may be surprised to hear that most of the Greek mythical beings and creatures may actually originate from the Mycenaeans. While the actual founding of Mycenae is long lost to prehistory, the legend states that it was founded by none other than the hero Perseus, the fabled son of Zeus and Danae. And that's Zeus as in the legendary god of thunder and not just somebody carrying the same name. It is also according to their legend that Heracles, or as you probably know him, Hercules, had to perform the 12 labors. If you look back into the mythical Greek stories, you will find many others that actually originate from the Mycenaeans, and it leads you to wonder whether or not this is the only known form of history for the ancient Greeks. It begs the question, what if they are actually true? And Greece was ruled by gods back before men thought to write things down. Number 6. The Trojan Horse. Before we move on from Mycenaean legends, there's one more that is worth the time. Most of us have heard at some point of the Trojan Horse and how it was used to smuggle troops into the city of Troy. What you may not realize is that it's not really a legend. It is believed today that the Trojan Horse could actually have existed, and that the Mycenaeans were the ones hiding within it. what archaeologists have discovered is that, based on where Troy is believed to be located, it would pose a huge threat as a trade rival to the Mycenaeans. The city, which could have been Troy, was also destroyed either by a natural event or an attack. Aside from this, there was also a burial ground where over 50 cremations occurred that was discovered with Mycenaean grave goods. This means that they were present just south of the city believed to be Troy. Of course, no horse was ever discovered, and these are only theories that have been formulated based upon what has been discovered. Honestly, we may never know for certain what happened there. Number 5. Divided into two classes. If you weren't the king, who in Mycenae was both a major religious as well as political symbol that naturally lived in a massive Cyclopean palace in the center of town, then you fell into one of two other classes in town. The first of these was the ruling class. This consisted of all the people responsible for the economy and even those in charge of the military recruitment and administrative duties, while the second class, or the common class, housed pretty much the rest of the people. Anything from servants to self-employed people that made a living through fishing, and even people working in some of the city's economic branches. The split may have seemed unnecessary, but it did help to keep any that might need to assist the king close on hand and allowed them to react quicker to any problems with the palace. Number 4. Strong military. If you had to look into the military side of the Mycenaeans, you will immediately notice that not only were they heavily focused on war, but that they were also extremely good at it and posed a major threat to any that might challenge them. Before you even consider their armies though, you need only to look at the city of Mycenae itself and the amount of effort that was put into fortifying the perimeter of the town, with the massive Cyclopean walls stopping any from entering illegally. From there, we next look at the graves of the Mycenaean royals and the large amounts of professionally made weapons that were buried alongside them, indicating that they were great war leaders during the time of their reign. Finally, you need to look at some of what has been successfully translated from their linear B writings. There, you will find scripts on the organization of their military personnel, as well as the production of weapons. According to some scripts, the rural communities had to supply men above a certain age who could serve in the army under their king. Number 3. Rich and powerful. Not only were the Mycenaeans incredible architects and warriors, but they were also extremely powerful and controlled the entire region that surrounded them. They took control over the sources of various precious metals, using it to trade with their neighbors for anything that they may have needed but couldn't simply supply themselves. Through this, they also used the nearby Minoans to gain access to Egypt and set up a trade route with them. Egypt became a great ally and required lots of produce, while Cyprus supplied the Mycenaeans with whatever was needed. The need to be the apex civilization in Greece led them to create enemies with both the Hittites, which is where the city of Troy is said to be located. Whether or not this may have led to the famous war surrounding the fabled Trojan Horse, however, is purely speculation. Number 2. The Fall of the Mycenaeans. The reason behind the fall of the Mycenaeans is not really known, but there is at least a theory on what eventually took the mighty nation down. Basically, what archaeologists believe is that they fell victim to a natural event such as an earthquake. There is evidence that supports this theory in that there are very few bodies found within the remains of Mycenae, which could suggest that people living there had time to flee before the buildings came down. With that said, it is still highly possible that there was a more minor earthquake or other disaster at the time which weakened the city and caused unrest throughout the people. Another nation could have taken advantage of this and attacked the city, finally bringing the nation down. There is also evidence to support this, as some of the buildings within Mycenae show signs of fire, which may prove that they were actually attacked and driven from the city. Once again, however, we may never actually know what happened to the Mycenaeans. Number 1. The Dark Ages. Possibly the most intriguing part of the whole Mycenaean story is the fact that Greece went through their Dark Ages not long after the Mycenaean Empire fell. Just in case you don't already know, the Dark Ages are essentially a period of time during which there is no recorded history. Everyone from the Hittites to the Trojans were destroyed not long after the fall of Mycenae. Smaller settlements began to show signs of famine, and they too eventually disappeared into history. Their fall also marked the beginning of the collapse of the Bronze Age, as nations began to fall. Even the decorative Greek pottery suffered. Instead of displaying feats of strength or stories, they simply displayed simple geometric designs. It was years before the world recovered. Tell us what you think about the disappearance of the Mycenaeans in the comments below, and take care.